Hello, hello. I'm your boss, Joe Boss, and welcome to another daily plan. Bitcoin crossed 50K today. Isn't this fantastic? What a great move it has been this month. I made some bearish calls on my expectations sometime at the beginning of last week, but I am so happy. So happy to see it much higher. I don't know how much higher it's going to end up going, but I am not one to be guessing. Because it's effectively going to be a guess, in my opinion. I think the high this month likely is going to be below 54K. You can actually see we're now in this probability gap with the 0% here, so I'm expecting another, like I said in the last streams, another $2,000-$3,000 higher, hit the high on the month, and then next week you have some particularly likely highs below that R1 pivot. So this has been fantastic. I hope it just continues and we get some crazy exponential move. But it's important to set expectations. And when your expectations are exceeded, be happy. That's why you have baseline positions, hopefully in your portfolio, the long-term holding positions, and then some trading positions, right? Especially for something like Bitcoin. There's a lot of people who have their cold wallet where they just have Bitcoin that they're going to hold on to forever for major financial decisions or for, as a savings effectively. And then they have a hot wallet. And the hot wallet is where they do their speculation, and that's a fraction of what they have in their cold wallet. A fraction of a fraction. I don't know, there's a guy who's a friend of Tone, Goat. Man. Yeah, I remember him and Tyler Jenks. Good guys. And Goat got a particularly great buy in 2020 on Bitcoin. That was fantastic. So this has been great. Don't get me wrong, these expectations have been wrong. These are just my speculative expectations based on the odds that I'm seeing. And when it comes down to Bitcoin, you have to be willing to let your expectations get broken to the upside very frequently, because there's a scarcity thing. If you don't understand the economics of Bitcoin, I'm not going to go into it now on this stream. I've gone into it a lot on prior streams, and maybe I'll go into it on a future stream. But if you know how much I know, then this seems very, very awesome just to see this move up. It's very nice to see. Very nice to see. So let's go ahead and get on with the rest of the show. I wanted to show off Bitcoin right off the bat. And yeah, just be careful of the tail. You never know. While my expectation is to stay below the 54K mark, you never know. So you never want to be caught with your pants down like a lot of people did with CPI this week, right? Dollar launched higher on CPI, and now it's drifting lower. Now these expectations have been met more closely this particular week. And these expectations were set way back here on February the 8th. So almost a week ago now. And happy Valentine's Day for you guys who have Valentines, all that good stuff. And let's go ahead and look at this on the month, because the title, this is DXY Monthly Top. I went ahead and I posted in the Discord, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin at 50K. I'm going to talk about how likely a DXY top for the month, whether, how likely it is, whether or not that's actually in for the month or not. Looking at this, I feel like it's pretty likely. It's one of the reasons why we set this expectation up here. When we go and look at the week, yeah, I was expecting it to go a tad higher, quite frankly, into the 105.1, 105.3 range. I don't know if we'll get that. There's still a potential that we get that, but now I'm focusing on the closing odds for the week, and the closing odds net call for this thing to pull back. And in yesterday's stream, we talked quite a bit about this, where depending on the asset you're looking at, it seems like there are different likelihoods of getting some sort of risk on pullback into the close of this week after the risk off move. One of the assets that I pulled up towards the end of last stream was ARK. And that thing shot up to a likely high and shot down once it hit that high. And now today, it's totally reversed that move. So this is insane. This volatility. This is fun. Oh man. Oh man, yeah. That is fun. Actually, I do want to check out the low odds here. Wow. I was for sure thinking you were going to get a lower low somewhere around here, but it doesn't seem like it's going to give us that. It seems like we're going to end up with a close. Okay, pull up these closing odds around here, effectively sideways, maybe a little bit of a green candle. I'd call it 50-50 whether or not the candle for the week itself is green or red, but I'd expect essentially sideways movement from here on ARK. And ARK is an interesting one to follow, because if ARK is doing particularly well, things can be especially risk on. I mean, yeesh. It's had some great swings. It's such a great asset to trade, in my opinion. Yeah, but ARK is not unfamiliar to big spikes. Oh man. Okay. Let's go down the G7 FX currencies here, which did have some pullback since we last looked at it yesterday. And today we are opening green. Let's check out our yield spreads here on the daily. And the yield spreads are still looking pretty darn bad. It seems like the expectations from the outlooks I'm reading are still for negative drift into the end of this month here. I'm going to hold off on drawing a new set of expectations until I get the week ahead outlooks from institutions over Thursday, Friday, Saturday, read through those, see what the net expectations are, and then look at next week's ranges and next week's seasonal pivot probabilities to come to a more rounded expectation for next week. So this is what USD CAD looks like. We're getting a nice pullback. I wonder how this thing worked on the day over here. So Nice thing about these indicators is that you can use them in replay mode. So let's go back one candle. Oh, man. Yeah, I never day traded until I built this thing. Check that out. There's a peak where you find a lot of your lows. In fact, most of the time, if you do get a low on the day, it's in this bin right here. 10.473% of the time, the low for the day is in this spot there. Isn't that nutty? And then it went to here, the one red highlighted density bin. Wow. Isn't that cool? Oh man, I'm in a good mood today. I'm in a pretty good mood today. So let's go and look at things on the week. I'm pretty sure we're going to be going to, I don't know. I'd say it's 50-50 whether or not you're going to go and end up closing the week above 65 or closing the week another 30 pips down on this. Up or down, it's a lot of institutions are trying to sell any risk on rallies against the dollar. So we'll see if they actually follow up with that here going into Thursday and Friday. So it's a little too soon to tell if they're going to follow up on that promise until, I don't know, maybe next week. We can actually pull up next week's pivots. You can see they're pretty bearish here on the low end for next week. And on the high end, yeah, so maybe coming back up to the mid 65s, and then it sells off. We'll see. Let's go ahead and hide this so it's easier for you guys to view. Okay, let's go to USD CAD. And yeah, this thing's probably going to continue going higher next week. It's got some pretty good bullish continuation odds, I believe. Yeah, fairly all right. Fairly all right. You got to worry about that. That's an option. Oh, let's go ahead and look at our ranges. Yeah, moves below 135, I'd be concerned about going into the low 134s. Continuation, right? That would be risk on. Well, yeah. This going down would be dollar getting weaker. Let's check out New Zealand. New Zealand is doing better. Again, I thought New Zealand was one of the few currencies that had the better risk reversal opportunities going into the end of this week. And it looks like it does. Let's check out the euro dollar. Again, it did have a pop. I'm just not so certain where the closing is going to be. I have quite a bit of uncertainty about where we'll end up closing this week. Yeah, you don't get your low down here too often. It's kind of a slip and slide when you're dealing with low probabilities like that. Okay, let's go check out the pound. Pound got a bounce, but probably the least strong out of, I mean, I'd say CAD had the least strong bounce, and this is in the second runner-up. Seems like it's going to be following this net expectation we set over here from last week, February 9th on Friday, last week, where we had the move higher, and we'll probably end up closing around here. My commentary on this when I drew these expectations was that I didn't, just looking at the odds, it was hard for me to set an expectation of where the low could be for this particular week on the pound. But I felt like, okay, if I'm just going to pick the nominal expectations, picking these highs and this close seems like a reasonable expectation for the economic events up ahead. Speaking of which, we have a few Fed speakers coming up, I believe, every single day until the end of the week, including later today. Tomorrow we have 2 speeches, I believe, and on Friday there's another speech. I don't know exactly who's speaking. I'd have to refresh and look at the economic calendar again. But those speeches, I'll go ahead and say this now, and I'll pull up the dollar when I say this. The primary risks during those speeches are going to be similar to the reaction that we had during FOMC, the last FOMC. During the last FOMC, Powell was asked a follow-up question, and during that follow-up question, he mentioned, we'll likely cut in May. And at that point, the dollar got real weak at some point. Let's see. Yeah. It got real weak off the reaction there. And then it just immediately shot back higher. Again, you want to be careful when Fed speakers come out and they say stuff about the future, because the market has a different view necessarily than the Fed. They try and model what the Fed is likely to do, right? So we want to be careful when Fed speakers are talking about their expectations for future inflation, how they're interpreting the latest CPI print, and if they say anything about their expectations for when the first cut will be. And that will help determine, after we look at all these Fed speakers and take their speeches into account altogether, how net hawkish or dovish the board at the Fed is, interpreting this latest CPI and their outlook for the future. And if it's not particularly dovish, if it's not particularly rosy on lower inflation coming forward, and they're optimistic about eventually doing rate cuts in May, because I think they'll have enough data by the time we get into May that inflation will be below the 3 handle. It'll be in the 2 handle. Question will be, if it's in the 2 handle, is that going to be enough for the Fed to do their first cut? So right now, if you looked at the CME website and you looked at the FOMC probability measures on that site, something like 50% probability of a rate cut now for May. It's been quite volatile. So wait and see what these Fed speakers are gonna say on the dollar side of things for these dollar assets, because if they say anything juicy, it'll end up moving markets. So let's go and now check out ES. ES got a nice bump higher. We set an expectation yesterday to go higher into the close. I don't know if we're going to be making a new high and closing the week green, but I'd expect us to close this week above 5,000 on the ES. NQ, it's on path. It also got a nice push higher. Again, I'm not totally sure now about getting the close here. There's potential drift for even going higher now that we're priced at this point here. But I don't think we're going to be making a new high this week. So my expectation is we're not going to go past this high. I'm still willing to say I have an expectation that we close in the 17.8K handle. That's still quite light. Again, that's a sort of naive expectation because we're currently priced in that handle. But easily getting to 17.9 is within a margin of error. Getting to 18K is in a margin of error. And expecting a little bit more positive drift sideways, lower volatility into the end of the week would be a good nominal expectation. However, considering these Fed speeches that are coming up, those can create some instantaneous volatility on those speeches if they say anything particularly hawkish or dovish. Who knows? Maybe there's someone who's saying, oh, I don't care what they're saying. I'm going to trade mean reversions off them. So if something snaps up or snaps down, I'm going to be selling likely highs and buying likely lows off the day when those pieces of commentary are made. There's a lot of people who have AI, natural language processing AI, to figure out the sentiment of speeches, and then they figure out, okay, is this bullish or bearish? And they just instantaneously get that sentiment measure into a robot and figure out, okay, net, this is dovish, net, buy some positions, some risk on positions. So we'll see how the markets react to those speeches. Net, I think the volatility is going to come down going into the end of the week, and we'll see how, if things spike on those speeches. And we already did Bitcoin. Ethereum is up 5%. Wow. Ethereum doing real well. And how's the rest of the world doing as far as equities go? UK. Wow. The FTSE is doing better. FTSE's probably going to end up closing the week green. What an excellent recovery. Okay, the CAC. CAC is already green on the week. Looks like it's going to go higher. All these European equities are on the day. Looks like they're outperforming the NASDAQ and the S&P. This is why having a globally diversified portfolio can come in handy. And yeah, Euro 50 doing well. We can check out I believe this is the top 10 assets, the top 10 equities in the S&P 500. So this isn't the Magnificent Seven. This is the top 10 by market cap. I may need to update this equity index, this custom equity index. But it seems like Apple, Microsoft, all the top 10 companies of the S&P are doing a nice little recovery here. But we'll see if they hold up, how the volatility goes into the end of the week, if there's any more positive drift. The Australian stock market also kicking itself back up. And the Japanese stock market, it looks like Bitcoin. It looks like Bitcoin. Wow, I definitely would be careful. Let's go ahead, check out the high seasonal odds here. Wow, 20% of the time, the high is much higher. Yeah, would not be surprised to see I believe this is Nikkei. Okay. Close above 38K, at least in USD denomination. Only equity index that isn't doing particularly fantastic seems to be New Zealand's. Yeah, they just keep getting beat up and beat up and beat up, which is interesting because their currency is one of the best performing from this last week. It's had a nice bout increase in volatility here. See, these big candles are definitely increasing the volatility. So we'll see if New Zealand can keep up its performance and stay at the top of the heap when it comes down to risk on returns against the US dollar. But that equity index is not looking particularly great. Oh, wow, that does look like a likely low on the month, though. Let's see, can we set an end of month expectation? Seems like it's pretty far from the mean of this distribution. Let's go ahead and check out our closes seasonally. So yeah, it looks kind of scattered. Maybe a bit of a positive drift above the 11.7K handle, or you rip on some particularly dovish news from the Fed, or some particularly, I don't know, if the RB&Z is more serious about getting hawkish and doing a rate hike. I am not so sure that's going to benefit New Zealand's stock market more. It might help out the currency a little bit, but I don't know if that's going to help their stock market get into this, you could say, 11.8K spot. Yeah, keep an eye on world indices and world equities. Man, Apple did not perform all too well today, huh? Nvidia, it's just been a straight line up. Good closing odds to go higher. Again, you're kind of in nowhere's land already on the high side, so this is already a slip and slide. This is yeah, this is where you can end up with a situation, if any more good news for Nvidia comes around, where you can end up in the high 700s in like 2 days. So selling this, you have to really know what you're doing. It's probably not going to be a smart move. It's, yeah, probably not going to be a smart move. The seasonal expectations aren't so great. They start to get a little bit more bearish towards the end of the month. So that's the 15th trading day. That's around the 22nd of Feb. So this is around the last week of February. Maybe some more bearishness comes in first week of March. So there's kind of this 2-week period where over the last 25 years, Nvidia doesn't do so hot. So maybe there'll be an opportunity sometime towards the last week of Feb for some sort of pullback into the close. But it doesn't, to me, seem like Nvidia is behaving seasonally. I don't know about you, but it doesn't look like it's behaving seasonally to me. And a prerequisite when using this indicator is that you have to have an assumption that the asset is behaving seasonally. So you can have seasonal expectations, but if the asset is not behaving seasonally, if there's something exogenous pushing it, it's going to override your seasonal expectations. So, and it's another good day for Stellantis, GM, Ford not doing so well. Chevron doing all right. Disney doing particularly well on its recovery here. Oh, wow. What an insane gap. Again, the corporate takeover at Disney, the shareholder takeover, is getting serious. So we'll see how these prices continue to fare for Disney. Again, they had a great surprise. Revenue didn't do so well. Earnings did do good. They did better than expected, but let's see if that continues going forward. Disney is definitely in an interesting situation. All right. With all that said and done, I think that's everything I wanted to say for today on the markets. Starting tomorrow, we'll start to think about expectations for the week ahead, and then potentially for the week ahead of that. Because once you start getting into the middle of the month, you have to start thinking about how the rest of the month is going to end and how the next month is going to begin. It's good to think a week and 2 and 3 and a month ahead for general expectations. So then if something sneaks up on you, some new bit of information comes in, you know how to interpret the new bit of information and how it changes current expectations for the weeks and the month ahead, and what sort of real ramifications it could have on the future expected path for prices. All right. I'll go ahead and end the show here. I'll go ahead and say thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in a bit.